All right, guys. So this is something that we don't get to see every day. Here we have Jeremy Scahill of Dropsite News making his way onto MSNBC with the host Eamon to directly call out the network's coverage of Israel and Gaza. Let's go ahead and jump into this clip here, and then I have a few more updates that I want to get to with you guys.
Co-founder of Dropsite News and co-founder of The Intercept. Jeremy, it's great to see you again. I know you've covered Hamas extensively throughout the year. You know a lot about Yahya Sinwar and other Hamas leaders. Can you tell us why, first of all, he has been so controversial as a figure to the Israelis and the Americans even before October 7th?
Yeah, I just want to begin by saying that as we're speaking tonight, the Israelis are waging an extermination campaign in the north of Gaza. For the past 2 weeks, they've surrounded the area, and they've intensified it after the killing of Yahya Sinwar. No food or medicine of any kind has reached most parts of the north. I'm in direct touch. I'm in with medical officials in the north and with journalistic colleagues. I understand that at least 80 people have been killed tonight in a horrifying set of attacks on half a dozen residential buildings. I've just gotten done seeing images from the ground where children are being shredded like meat in a butcher shop. I don't understand how any of us, whether we're journalists or not, this isn't about objectivity, how any of us can watch this genocide unfold in real time and watch the pontificating of the politicians running for president and not just cry out, this has to stop. I mean, this has to stop. We've looked at this. I mean, I know you've reported on the ground from Gaza. I mean, we're watching a genocide in real time, and I'm sorry, but on this network also, there are people who have promoted propaganda from Israel. There are people cheerleading for those running for office who are lying to the American people about concern for the Palestinians. And yes, we should talk about Yahya Sinwar. But Yahya Sinwar is also in many ways the story of Gaza. You know, yes, this was a violent man, but his violence was rooted in the fact that he was born in a refugee camp. And Israel, throughout his entire life, waged a war of annihilation against the Palestinians. I'm not here to defend Yahya Sinwar. I'm here to say that we can't talk about who Yahya Sinwar was or what Hamas is without talking about 76 years of colonialism, of apartheid, of mass killing, of mowing the lawn, of controlling the calories. Yahya Sinwar's death, the White House is saying this provides a moment to sort of pivot and to make a settlement. And what does Netanyahu do in response to those speeches from Kamala Harris and Joe Biden and John Kirby? He doubles down. Yep. He goes full force, final solution on the people of northern Gaza. Yes, let's talk about Yahya Sinwar, but my God, we cannot watch more children being shredded and say that this is okay.
Well, this is
just a political issue.
No, and I was actually going to get to that because I was going to ask you, based on what you've just outlined for us about him, I was going to say that despite the killing of Yahya Sinwar, who was Israel's most wanted man, who was their excuse for basically doing everything as the mastermind of October 7th, we're still seeing attacks against Palestinians in northern Gaza, as you just outlined with the siege that has been unfolding there for the last couple of weeks after a year of complete annihilation. And this was on the heels of an American president and a vice president who have said it's time for a new page, and the Israelis continuously buffing them and defying every time they've given them basically an order or demand to change course.
Yeah, that's right. And what's interesting is that the Israelis have portrayed for the past year Yahya Sinwar as a rat hiding in tunnels, using Israeli hostages as his human shields. And certainly Yahya Sinwar and others in Hamas operate in these tunnels. That's been well known. But look at the narrative, even from Israel's perspective. You laid some of this out. Yahya Sinwar died in combat gear with one of his arms basically severed, in the middle of the front end of it. And he manages to throw a stick at a drone. And the Israelis put this out, and they sort of did Sinwar's job for him by solidifying his reputation as a man who was willing to die for the cause of Palestinian liberation. So we're in a situation right now where the entire Middle East is on fire. Netanyahu's house was hit. Hezbollah had one of its most successful drone strikes recently on the Golani military base, killing a number of Israeli soldiers. The United States has moved the THAAD missile system into Israel, has troops on the ground. The White House is sort of humble bragging that U.S. special operations and intelligence were assisting Israel operate in these tunnels. That's been well known. But look at the narrative, even from Israel's perspective. You laid some of this out. Yahya Sinwar died in combat gear with one of his arms basically severed, in the middle of the front end of it, and he manages to throw a stick at a drone. And the Israelis put this out, and they sort of did Sinwar's job for him by solidifying his reputation as a man who was willing to die for the cause of Palestinian liberation. So we're in a situation right now where the entire Middle East is on fire. Netanyahu's house was hit. Hezbollah had one of its most successful drone strikes recently on the Golani military base, killing a number of Israeli soldiers. The United States has moved the THAAD missile system into Israel, has troops on the ground. The White House is sort of humble bragging that U.S. special operations and intelligence were assisting Israel in the operations on the ground in Gaza, including high-value targeting operations. And we have a lame duck president who really seems intent on following through with his undying support for Israel at a time when an utter lunatic is in office in Tel Aviv right now that is threatening what would amount to just a complete incendiary arson campaign throughout the Middle East that's going to be bankrolled and armed by the United States. We are in a moment where this has to stop.
Right.
We can't just sit here as journalists or normal people or whatever your job is and watch human beings shredded and say that's self-defense. Nothing is self-defense about this. I've covered wars for 25 years. There is nothing about self-defense with what Israel is doing right now tonight in northern Gaza.
So, first off, shout out to Jeremy Scahill for laying it all out there. I don't know that he'll be allowed back on MSNBC after this kind of an appearance, but credit to him for, saying it like it is, and credit to Eamon as well on MSNBC for having somebody like Jeremy knowing that this is the kind of stuff that he will say onto his platform as well. Credit to both of these guys, honestly. Eamon is one of the maybe less than a handful of journalists on this entire network who will have these kinds of conversations in a good faith and honest way. So, shout out to both of them. Now, in terms of what Jeremy was actually saying there, especially towards the end, basically what you have right now is a situation where Israel, Netanyahu are hell-bent on setting the entire region on fire. And because the Joe Biden administration, because the U.S. government broadly are unwilling to check Israel, we are on what seems to be sort of an inevitable trajectory towards doom, right? That's the current pathway that we have found ourselves on. All of this comes down to the Joe Biden administration being completely unwilling to use the leverage that we have over Israel to bring an end to this. And that ties into one of the earlier points that Jeremy was making in this piece, which is that you can have John Kirby and Matthew Miller and Kamala Harris and whoever else come out and say that the death of Yahya Sinwar is an off-ramp, right? This is a potential to end the genocide in Gaza. It's a potential to end the ongoing hostilities with Hezbollah and end to the, escalation with Iran. They can come out and say that, and that's all fine and dandy, right? But if there's no policy adjustment backing it up, then that's not going to happen. Because in order to believe that the death of Sinwar leads to an end of the genocide in Gaza, in order to believe that, you have to believe that Israel's goal in Gaza was to target the leadership of Hamas, or their goal in Gaza was just to, dismantle as much as they could Hamas's military infrastructure. That has not been their goal in Gaza from day one. Their goal has been a massive, large-scale, collective punishment campaign of the entire population of Gaza. Innocent men, women, children, right? You don't end up in a situation where you've destroyed a vast majority of the civilian infrastructure. You don't end up in a situation where the entire population is displaced, where a vast majority of the people you're killing are innocent women and children. You don't end up bombing schools and hospitals and churches and mosques and refugee camps and UN shelters and aid workers and journalists. You don't end up with that situation if you're doing a targeted hunt for Hamas, right? That's not how we got to this point in the first place. So magically believing that taking out somebody like Sinwar is going to lead to the end of Palestinian resistance or an end to the Israeli genocide in Gaza is honestly just delusional. It's delusional. There has to be a policy change in order for anything on the ground to substantively change, right? Now, again, the Joe Biden administration, Kamala Harris, Donald Trump, none of these people are willing to confront Israel, and so there is no change. There is no change. And so that makes it even more important, honestly, that we have guys like Eamon, that we have guys like Jeremy Scahill who are willing to do their jobs, right? And to confront the power centers in this country. Jeremy Scahill directly there calling out the coverage from MSNBC and directly calling out other journalists who try to waffle on this issue, who try to play both sides on this issue, right? There are no both sides of a genocide. Right? There are no both sides. There's no possible way as an honest, good faith journalist looking at what has happened over the last year that you can come to the conclusion that what Israel is doing is self-defense. This is not self-defense by any stretch of the imagination. So again, credit to Jeremy Scahill for going there on MSNBC and laying that all out for people. Now, we also have some updates generally coming out of Gaza, as Jeremy was noting there. There seems to be a full-blown ethnic cleansing, a full-blown, I don't think it's dishonest to call it an annihilation campaign in the north of Gaza right now. Remember, I covered the story a few weeks ago of Israel essentially threatening the hundreds of thousands of people who remained in North Gaza to either leave or be starved or killed if they remained, right? That is the threat that we saw from Israel a few weeks ago, and they are currently following through on that threat. So here from Al Jazeera, genocide unfolding, 640 Palestinians have been killed in North Gaza in the last 17 days. They say rescue workers were banned from accessing besieged areas, making it difficult to get the exact number of people killed. And I would not be surprised in the slightest if this 640 number there is an underestimation. Now, we also have a quote here from the Palestinian Authority saying that genocide is unfolding in northern Gaza in its clearest form, in full view of the world. Now, there are clips that I could show you guys from Jabalia, that I could show you guys from other parts of North Gaza. I don't think that I can get away with putting them here on YouTube without getting this video not only fully demonetized, but also taken down in its entirety. You know, as Jeremy was laying out there are children, I mean, literal children being ripped to pieces right now as we speak in northern Gaza. It seems like there is no possible pathway for any of these people who remain there to safety. And the videos are absolutely horrific, as terrible as you could possibly imagine. Now, we also have them saying here, quote, that the occupation army is forcing residents of northern Gaza to either flee under bombardment or face killing in what resembles a circle of certain death, adding that this war of extermination has emboldened Israel to continue its deadly campaign, pointing out the failure of the international community to stop Israel. They also say that there has been a mass blackout in northern Gaza, adding to the fears that, you know, Israel's targeting of journalists, their targeting of, you know, internet infrastructure, communications infrastructure is part of the goal of not allowing any sort of information to escape from northern Gaza as they engage in this extermination campaign. We also have here, quote, saying that food, water, and medicine have run out, while Israeli air attacks have hit several areas across Gaza. The concentration of its army's attacks remain in the north, in particular in the Jabalia refugee camp. Now, they also say that meanwhile, Palestinian women forced to flee North Gaza said that the Israeli army is separating and arresting dozens of men at checkpoints. Now, we'll see a little bit of that here in a second. There's really only one historical comparison that I could bring up, as we'll get to that video here in a minute. Now, we also have, as pointed out here by Jeremy Scahill's Dropsite News alongside Ryan Grimm, they've been doing a great job of keeping up with the latest details and reports out of Gaza. They say that 33 Palestinians have been killed in an Israeli bombing of the Al-Hawari family home in Jabalia. They say 21 out of the 33, nearly 2/3 there, are women. Now, you can see some of the aftermath here. This is about as safe of a video as I can get away with showing you guys here on YouTube. You know, as bleak as that may seem, these are essentially body bags here. I mean, this is the kind of carnage that we are seeing on a daily basis inside of Gaza. This is what has been normalized. This is what has been normalized. The deaths of dozens and dozens of innocent people on a daily basis. This is what our government is supporting. Now, this was a terrifying video that I saw floating across my timeline where we had a child who looks to have been targeted by the Israeli government here. You can see him injured on the ground. You then had sort of a double tap situation here as he is unable to move and calling out for help from anybody who could potentially walk up and bring him from the strike zone. And as people started to surround him to try to help him, you know, this is going to happen very quickly here, but you can see a second Israeli strike hit exactly where these people went to try to help them. I mean, it's so quick that, you know, you can't even see it happen in real time. But there you see what looks to be maybe a drone strike directly targeting this group of people who went to assist this child who had been struck by the Israeli military. Now, you also have, I think this is the strike that Jeremy was bringing up in that MSNBC interview, where 80 people were reportedly killed in an Israeli airstrike that flattened entire residential buildings inside of Gaza. You can see a little bit of the aftermath here with these explosions taking place in the background. Again, this is the kind of shit that we have normalized at this point in this country. This is not normal, guys. It's not normal to just willy-nilly, off a whim, level entire residential blocks. This is not a normal aspect of war, right? The Israeli military wants to push forward with this narrative that any country in our situation after October 7th would do the same thing that we are doing. That's simply not true. That's not true. This has been arguably the single most destructive and deadly, at least proportionately, war of death and destruction in modern history. There is no real precedent for this. I mean, again, you have a majority of the buildings in Gaza that have been destroyed. 100% of the population has been displaced. You don't get to that point in a normal war, right? None of this is normal. This is a genocide. This is what genocide looks like. And this is just sort of a daily occurrence, not only, by the way, in Gaza, but now also in Lebanon as well, where they have been flattening entire communities. And I'll show you one of those videos here in a sec. We also have the continued targeting of hospitals and the healthcare infrastructure generally inside of Gaza. They say here that only 3 hospitals are left in northern Gaza. And to say that these are hospitals sort of gives the implication that they are functioning hospitals. They're really not at this point. There is no fully functional hospital left inside of Gaza. They have all been targeted. But now we're at the point where Israel is forcefully, violently evacuating these hospitals and attacking these hospitals to make it so that in the northern portion of Gaza, where previously, before October 7th, the main population center in Gaza was, that there is no healthcare left. That's what they're trying to do. They have essentially tried to surround, entrap, and starve out and bomb everybody who has been left in northern Gaza. 400,000 people. And again, this isn't contained within Gaza. This is the exact same kind of death and destruction that we are now seeing in Lebanon. Now, this was a community. These are images from the IDF, by the way, not even ashamed of their tactics here. But here you have them blowing up an entire community. Now, take note of what this explosion looks like. I've seen multiple different videos now of the IDF inside of Lebanon doing controlled demolitions of entire communities inside of Lebanon. The same kind of shit that we saw in Gaza as well. A controlled demolition means, by definition, that there was no active military threat from this place. It means that you went into this place, had time to rig it with explosives, to step back and to get drone footage of you demolishing the place, because your goal is not to wipe out Hamas or Hezbollah militants, but your goal is to make these places uninhabitable. That's your goal. And I think they're making that pretty explicitly clear here with strikes like this. We also have Oxfam reporting that the IDF has bombed, yet again, another clearly marked vehicle, killing 4 engineers going to repair water infrastructure in southern Gaza after they had coordinated with the Israeli authorities. Now, this should sound incredibly familiar to anybody who has been following my channel for a while now. We've covered this kind of story, a dozen times at least at this point, where it's almost at the point now where if you are an aid organization or if you are a civilian organization inside of Gaza, coordinating with the IDF, giving them your location to try to be spared from Israeli bombardment, actually ends up putting a target on your back. Here we have a situation where you have aid workers who are trying to repair water infrastructure. They are in active coordination with the IDF, and the IDF says, no, we actually don't want you to repair that water infrastructure, because destroying that water infrastructure is part of our goal of extermination inside of Gaza. So we're going to kill you. And they end up killing 4 engineers in the process. This is nothing new. This is not an accident. Anybody who believes this is an accident is delusional at this point. We also have, incredibly disturbing images here And again, as I pointed out earlier, hard to come up with some sort of a comparison here historically, other than the one I think we are all thinking about here, as Israel has been rounding up en masse men, women, children, disproportionately it looks like men, but also women and children, in huge formations like this inside of North Gaza, and continuing to raid homes in Jabalia of displaced families. Some of these men have been taken to who knows where. Some of these people have been killed. Some other people have been displaced and forced to walk through the rubble towards the south through a relentless bombing campaign. I don't know how else to portray this kind of a situation. I don't know how to describe these kinds of images other than what I've already described, which is this is arguably one of the most obvious genocides in the history of humanity. So go and follow Dropsite News, by the way, not only for Jeremy Scahill's take, but for this continued coverage of what's happening in Gaza, what's happening in Lebanon, and also what's happening in the West Bank. I mean, this was a recent video that they posted of Israeli terrorism against Palestinians in the West Bank. This specifically was an international activist who was attacked by Israeli forces as well as settlers while they were out collecting olives inside of the West Bank. This is sort of daily terrorism that Palestinians are, expected to just sort of endure as if it's nothing. Now, we also have here another reminder from Itamar Ben-Gvir, the Minister of National Security in Israel, making his plans for Gaza explicitly clear. He was at an event that was about preparing to resettle Gaza. That's what it was. It was called the Preparing to Resettle Gaza Conference. It took place over 2 days on Israel's southern border with Gaza. Ben-Gvir was greeted by eager applause from the crowd, saying, "We are the owners of the land." He also says that when we act like it, this is what brings results. He repeated his calls to encourage Gazans to voluntarily transfer to other countries because that land belongs to us. So, going back to Jeremy Scahill at the beginning of this is what I think one of the major problems is with U.S. media, is that I can show you guys the latest out of what Israeli officials, what IDF troops are saying on the ground. They don't talk about this kind of stuff. And it's this huge glaring hole in their coverage that I think paints the entirety of the picture of what Israel's goals are. How do you cover what Israel is doing and only utilize, State Department talking points, or only utilize the English version of whatever latest statement that Netanyahu puts out? How do you not cover that a key member of Benjamin Netanyahu's coalition, Itamar Ben-Gvir, the Minister of National Security in Israel, is attending a conference called Preparing to Resettle Gaza? They're making their goals explicitly clear. There's no two ways about this. According to Itamar Ben-Gvir and other members within Netanyahu's coalition, the goal is ethnic cleansing followed by indefinite occupation followed by resettlement of Gaza. It is a settler colonial project. That's what this is. They don't hide it. They're not making this difficult for Western journalists and governments to understand. They openly say this shit. You have to be willfully, intentionally, dishonestly ignoring this to not understand exactly what their goals are. He's saying it here. The goals are occupation, ethnic cleansing, resettlement. Those are the goals for Gaza and South Lebanon as well. Now, we also have here continued attacks again against the hospital infrastructure in Beirut using the Gaza playbook now. As you can see from this animation down here, this may look a little bit familiar. Here is a hospital inside of Lebanon where it seems like they're using the same exact playbook that they used in Gaza, specifically for Al-Shifa and that hospital complex that they set on fire and destroyed, leveled to the ground, along with the surrounding infrastructure of that hospital complex. I mean, they tore up the roads, they tore up the buildings surrounding it. Everything within sight was destroyed around Al-Shifa. And this looks to be exactly the same playbook that they used to get away with destroying Al-Shifa Hospital. I mean, the same sort of 3D rendering of some sort of a mass sprawling underground command and control center from Hezbollah. They got a bunch of weapons down here. They have a Hezbollah flag ominously sitting in the corner here. Massive underground complex. Now, will they ever provide any sort of evidence for this claim? I guess yet to be seen. I guess we have to wait, according to the U.S. government, for them to fully destroy this hospital, and then maybe we'll get an idea of what their evidence is. Now, we also have here from UNIFIL another statement on the continued Israeli attacks against the UN peacekeepers who are in Lebanon. They say earlier today, a IDF bulldozer deliberately demolished an observation tower and perimeter fence of a UN position in Mar Wohin. They say, yet again, we remind the IDF and all actors of their obligations to ensure the safety and security of UN personnel and property, to respect the inviolability of the UN premises at all times. They say, yet again, we note that breaching a UN position and damaging UN assets is a flagrant violation of international law and Security Council Resolution 1701. It also endangers the safety and security of our peacekeepers in violation of international humanitarian law. So here you have UN peacekeepers desperately begging the IDF to stop attacking them inside of Lebanon. You have the United Nations having to beg a UN member state to stop attacking them. This has been going on for weeks now at this point. Israel doesn't want, let's be really clear about this, they don't want UN peacekeepers there because they don't want witnesses to what they're doing inside of southern Lebanon. That's the reason for this. Now, to finish it off here, again, as if this wasn't bleak enough, we have Kamala Harris doubling down on her support for what Israel is doing. Now, let's not let Donald Trump off the hook. Obviously, his policy in regards to Israel, in regards to Gaza in the West Bank, is absolutely abysmal. But Kamala Harris, obviously sort of, I guess, nominally supposed to be on the better side of this equation, running for president right now, has said that the empathy that she has expressed for Palestinians in Gaza should not be confused with any willingness to break from U.S. foreign policy towards Israel. So, in other words, she's saying, don't listen to my platitudes about caring of the suffering of Palestinians in Gaza. Don't listen to that, because my policy is not changing. I'm still firmly pro-genocide. I'm still firmly in favor of giving Israel the weapons, the political cover to continue with their extermination campaign. Now, same time, again, on the political angle, we had, and I'll link this down below if you guys want to watch the entirety of this. I won't go through it now because this video will end up being 45 minutes long, but MSNBC actually had a panel of Arab American voters in swing states who essentially, as the quote points out here, said, nothing she can do or say for us at this point will change our minds. You did this to yourself, right? There are no excuses. There's nobody else to blame. You had the opportunity. You could have broken from Biden. You could have broken from Israel. And instead you chose to double and triple and quadruple down on this. I mean, reminder, guys, they banned a fucking Palestinian speaker, even a Palestinian speaker who was going to endorse Kamala Harris, from speaking at the DNC. They wouldn't even let a pro-Kamala Palestinian American speak at the DNC. You asked for this. You asked for this. There is nobody to blame other than yourself. You could have changed policy, and you refused to. So I'll leave it off there for now. Obviously, we're going to have more coverage as the week goes on. But we continue to be on this horrifying trajectory, guys. There is a full-blown extermination campaign in North Gaza. There is a continued escalation of Israel's invasion of southern Lebanon. There is a continued escalation towards a potential regional war with Iran. In fact, we had recent reporting from Ken Klippenstein on Israel's plan to strike Iran. And it seems like we have no leadership in sight that's willing to confront this. Not on the Republican side and not on the Democratic side.
Politic guy has the best politic. Believe me, no one does it like him. Believe me, everyone is saying